"Get your dirty foot off my armrest." That was the simple, polite request that started a war at 30,000 feet. But what happened next wasn't just a viral video. It was a calculated attempt to destroy a man's life. You think you know entitled passengers? You haven't met Courtney Vance, a woman who treated a first-class cabin like her personal living room, and then, in a twist that shocked the nation, sued the very man she tormented for $1.5 million. But she didn't know who Nathaniel George really was, or the secret weapon he was saving for the courtroom. Sit down and buckle up, because this karma hits harder than a crash landing. The silence in the Superior Court of Los Angeles was heavy, smelling faintly of lemon polish and old wood. It was the kind of silence that usually preceded a life sentence, not a civil dispute over an airline incident. On the left side of the aisle sat Nathaniel George. At 45, Nathaniel was a man who exuded a quiet, architectural stability. Wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, he sat with his hands clasped on the table. He was a man who had built his own empire from the dirt up, the CEO of George Dynamics, a logistics firm that moved half of the West Coast's freight. But today, he wasn't a CEO. To the jury, he was a violent aggressor. On the right side sat the plaintiff, Courtney Vance. Courtney was 23, blonde, and currently dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue that looked more expensive than most people's curtains. She was dressed in a soft pastel cardigan, a deliberate choice to make her look younger, smaller, and more fragile than she actually was. She looked nothing like the woman in the viral photos. Today, she was the picture of traumatized innocence. Her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, stood up. Sterling was a man known in L.A. legal circles as the Viper. He didn't just win cases, he eviscerated the opposition. He adjusted his silk tie and turned to the jury, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sterling began, pacing slowly. "We live in a society where personal space is sacred, where a young woman should feel safe traveling alone. But on December 14th, on Flight 402 from JFK to LAX, that safety was shattered." He pointed a manicured finger at Nathaniel. "That man?" Sterling boomed, suddenly raising his voice, causing a juror in the front row to jump. "That man decided that his comfort was more important than my client's dignity. When Ms. Vance, suffering from a documented medical condition that causes swelling in her legs, simply tried to find a moment of relief, Mr. George didn't call a flight attendant. He didn't ask politely. He lashed out. He physically assaulted her, causing her severe emotional distress, PTSD, and a loss of income from her brand partnerships." Sterling paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. "We are asking for $1.5 million in damages. Not for the money, but to teach Mr. Nathaniel George that you cannot bully a young woman just because you think you own the plane." Nathaniel didn't flinch. He didn't frown. He simply watched Sterling with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a cockroach. Next to Nathaniel, his attorney, Alana Hart, scribbled something on her notepad. Alana was sharp, terrifyingly intelligent, and hated bullies. She leaned over to Nathaniel. "He's good," she whispered. "He's painting you as the angry black man, and her as the helpless white damsel. It's an old script." "Scripts get rewritten," Nathaniel murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Did you get the file from the airline?" "I got it," Alana smiled, a dangerously sharp expression. "And I got the other thing, the video Sterling doesn't know about." "Good," Nathaniel said, his eyes locking onto Courtney across the aisle. She briefly looked up, catching his gaze, and for a split second, the facade dropped. A sneer of pure, unfiltered entitlement flashed across her face before she buried it back in her tissue. She thought she had won. She thought because her father, Robert Vance, was a real estate tycoon with connections to half the judges in the state, she could kick a man, humiliate him, and then get paid for it. She had no idea that the trial hadn't even started yet. The judge, the Honorable Justice Holloway, cleared his throat. "Mr. Sterling, call your first witness." "I call Courtney Vance to the stand," Sterling announced. As Courtney rose, trembling melodramatically, Nathaniel closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to that Tuesday. The day the peace he had worked 20 years to afford was ruined by a pair of unwashed feet. The flashback hit Nathaniel viscerally. He could almost smell the recycled air and the faint scent of jet fuel. It was Flight 402, Delta 1, JFK to Los Angeles. Nathaniel had just come off a 3-week negotiation marathon in London. He was exhausted. His bones felt heavy. He had paid a premium for Seat 2A, a window seat in first class, specifically so he could sleep for 5 hours straight. He had boarded early, stowed his briefcase, and declined a pre-flight champagne. He just wanted water and silence. He put on his noise-canceling headphones, not turning them on yet, just using them as a do not disturb sign to the world. Then, the storm arrived. "Oh my God, Brittany, look!" "They don't have the good amenity kits." A shrill voice pierced through the cabin. Nathaniel cracked one eye open. Walking down the aisle were 2 young women who looked like they had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in arrogance. One was a brunette, distracted by her phone. The other was Courtney Vance. She was wearing a neon pink tracksuit that cost more than a Honda Civic, holding a Starbucks cup in one hand and a Fanta carry-on bag that was clearly too large for the overhead bin in the other. "Excuse me," Courtney barked at a passing flight attendant, a patient woman named Sarah. "Can you put this up for me? It's heavy." "I can assist you, miss, but we ask passengers to lift their own bags if possible to prevent injury," Sarah said politely. "I'm not lifting that. That's your job," Courtney scoffed, dropping the bag in the middle of the aisle and squeezing past toward seat 2B. 2B. The aisle seat. Right next to Nathaniel. Nathaniel internally groaned. "Please, let her switch seats. Let her realize she wants to sit with her friend." "Brittany, where are you?" Courtney yelled, not caring that half the cabin was already trying to sleep. "I'm in 4B, Brittany called back from 2 rows behind. "Ugh, whatever. I'll just come back there later to gossip. I need to stretch," Courtney said. She slammed her body into seat 2B, jostling Nathaniel's armrest. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look at him. To her, Nathaniel was just a piece of furniture, an obstacle in her peripheral vision. The plane finished boarding. The doors closed. The safety demonstration began. Nathaniel adjusted his seat, trying to make himself small, trying to retreat into his own world. He closed his eyes. Thump. He felt a vibration on his seat. Thump. Rustle. He opened his eyes and looked down. Courtney had kicked off her designer sneakers. She wasn't wearing socks. Her bare feet were pale, and frankly, they didn't look clean. She was digging around in her bag, tossing items onto the empty middle console between them. "Can you believe this Wi-Fi isn't on yet?" she muttered to no one, or perhaps to the universe, expecting it to answer. Nathaniel remained silent. He turned on his music. Jazz. Coltrane. Focus on the saxophone. 10 minutes after takeoff, the seatbelt sign turned off. Nathaniel reclined his seat fully, turning it into a bed. He pulled the duvet up to his chest, ready for oblivion. And then he smelled it. It wasn't a subtle smell. It was sharp, yeasty, and acrid. The smell of sweat and unwashed skin. Nathaniel frowned, pausing his music. He turned his head to the right. Courtney Vance had not only reclined her seat, but she had also contorted her body into a bizarre pretzel shape. Her back was against the window wall of her pod, and her legs were extended outward. Her left foot, bare, calloused, with a chipped black toenail polish, was resting directly on top of the privacy divider between their seats. But it wasn't just on the divider. Because Nathaniel was lying flat, her heel was encroaching into his airspace. It was hovering inches from his face. He stared at the foot in disbelief. It was so disrespectful, so lacking in basic human awareness, that for a moment he thought it was a prank. He cleared his throat, loudly. Courtney didn't move. She was scrolling through Instagram, giggling at something on her screen. Nathaniel sat up slightly, pulling one ear cup of his headphones back. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was deep, calm, and authoritative. Courtney didn't look up. She kept scrolling. "Miss?" Nathaniel said, louder this time. Courtney finally paused. She turned her head slowly, looking at him with an expression of utter annoyance, as if he were the one intruding. "What?" she snapped. "Your foot," Nathaniel said, gesturing to the appendage that was currently polluting his air. "It's in my space, and frankly, it smells. Could you please put it down?" The cabin was quiet. The low hum of the engines was the only background noise. Several passengers in the surrounding pods looked up, sensing the tension. Courtney looked at her foot, then looked back at Nathaniel. A slow, malicious smile spread across her face. "I have a medical condition," she lied smoothly. "I need to elevate my legs. And I paid for this seat, so I can sit however I want." "You paid for your seat," Nathaniel corrected, his patience fraying at the edges. "You didn't pay for the air above mine. Put your foot down." "Or what?" Courtney challenged, her voice raising an octave, ensuring the other passengers could hear. "Are you going to make me?" "You're making me feel really unsafe right now. Why are you staring at my feet? That's creepy." The gaslighting was instant. She was flipping the script before the conflict had even fully matured. "I am asking you to practice basic hygiene and manners," Nathaniel said, his jaw tightening. "Brittany!" Courtney yelled, turning around to look behind her. "This guy is harassing me!" Brittany popped her head up from row 4. "What? Is he bothering you?" "He's yelling at me because I'm stretching," Courtney cried out, putting a hand to her chest. A flight attendant, Sarah, hurried down the aisle. She looked stressed. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah asked, looking between the two. "Yes," Nathaniel said, pointing. "Her bare foot is in my face." "He's screaming at me," Courtney interrupted, creating fake tears instantly. "I'm just trying to get comfortable and he's being so aggressive. I don't feel safe sitting next to him." Sarah looked at the foot, which was still defiantly propped up on the console, encroaching on Nathaniel's side. She looked at Nathaniel, who was clearly a professional trying to keep his cool, and then at Courtney, who was radiating entitled chaos. "Ma'am," Sarah said gently, "I do need to ask you to keep your feet within your own suite." "For safety reasons," Courtney huffed, rolling her eyes so hard it looked painful. She slowly, deliberately dragged her heel across the leather divider, leaving a smudge, and retracted her leg. "Fine," she hissed. "God, you people are miserable." Nathaniel let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He nodded thanks to Sarah and lay back down. He thought it was over. He was wrong. 10 minutes later, as Nathaniel drifted into a light doze, he felt something cold and hard nudge his shoulder. He opened his eyes. Courtney had put her foot back up, but this time she had extended it further. Her toes were actually touching the shoulder of his expensive suit jacket. She was staring right at him, daring him to do something. "Oops," she whispered, a wicked glint in her eye. "I slipped." Nathaniel didn't speak. He realized in that moment that this wasn't about comfort. This was about power. She wanted to see if she could make the big, successful black man submit to her disrespect. He slowly sat up, removing his headphones completely. He reached for the call button, but before he could press it, Courtney laughed. "Go ahead. Call them. I'll tell them you touched me," she whispered venomously. "Who do you think they're going to believe? Me or you?" It was a question loaded with centuries of ugly history, and she wielded it like a knife. Nathaniel looked at her. He looked at the foot. And then he did something Courtney didn't expect. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who just realized he had been handed a winning lottery ticket, provided he played his cards exactly right. "You're right," Nathaniel said softly. "They might believe you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Hey, put that away," Courtney snapped, suddenly realizing the lens was pointed at her. "Smile, Courtney," Nathaniel said calm. "You wanted attention? You're about to get it." That was the moment the physical altercation, according to Courtney's lawsuit, began. But the truth of what happened in the next 30 seconds was the key to the entire trial. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 402 didn't just shift, it shattered. The air, previously filled with the soft clinking of silverware and the low murmur of movies, was now charged with static electricity. Nathaniel held his phone steady. His hand didn't shake. He had negotiated billion-dollar mergers while exhausted and jet-lagged. He wasn't going to let a 23-year-old in a pink tracksuit rattle him. On his screen, the image was crisp. Courtney Vance, face contorted in a sneer, her bare foot resting defiantly on his shoulder, staining the expensive Italian wool of his jacket. "I said, put that away!" Courtney screeched. Her voice wasn't just loud. It was sharp, designed to cut through the ambient noise of the engines and draw every eye in the vicinity. "I'm documenting this," Nathaniel said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Since you threatened to lie to the crew, I'm ensuring we have an accurate record of events." Courtney's eyes widened. For a fleeting second, Nathaniel saw genuine fear behind the entitlement. Not fear of him, but fear of exposure. Fear that the script she had been running her whole life, the one where she was the princess and everyone else was a servant, was about to be flipped. But fear in people like Courtney often transmutes instantly into aggression. She lunged. It happened in slow motion for Nathaniel. He saw her muscles tense, saw the manicured hand claw out. She wasn't reaching for the phone gently. She was striking out, her nails aimed at his face, at the device, at anything she could hurt. "Give me that!" she screamed. Her hand connected with Nathaniel's forearm, a sharp, stinging slap that echoed in the small space. Her nails raked across his wrist, drawing thin lines of red. Nathaniel didn't strike back. He didn't yell. Decades of discipline kicked in. He simply reacted defensively. As she swung a second time, aiming for his face, he raised his left hand and caught her wrist. He held it there, firmly, just enough to stop the blow. "Do not touch me," Nathaniel said. His voice dropped to a register that vibrated in the chest. It was a command, absolute and final. Courtney froze. She looked at her wrist, trapped in his large hand. She looked at his face, which was hard as granite. And then she looked around the cabin. She saw the other passengers staring. She saw Brittany, her friend, fumbling to get her own phone out. And just like that, the switch flipped. Courtney threw her head back and let out a scream that sounded like she was being murdered. "Get off me! He's hurting me! Help! He's breaking my arm!" She began to thrash, not to escape, but to make it look like a struggle. She threw her body against the privacy divider, knocking over the glass of water on Nathaniel's tray table. Ice and water splashed over his lap. Nathaniel immediately released her wrist and pulled his hands back, holding them up in the air, palms open. The universal sign of surrender. The universal sign of "I am not the aggressor. I am not touching you," he said clearly, addressing the witnesses. But the damage was done. Sarah, the flight attendant, came sprinting down the aisle, followed by a male attendant named David. "What is going on here?" David demanded, his voice booming. "He hit me," Courtney sobbed, collapsing back into her seat, cradling her wrist as if it were shattered. The tears were instantaneous, flowing with a terrifying ease. "He was filming me, like a creep. And when I asked him to stop, he grabbed me. He twisted my arm." She looked up at David with wide, wet eyes. "I think he broke it." "Please, get him away from me." David turned to Nathaniel. His expression was dark. He didn't see the CEO of George Dynamics. He didn't see the man who had been politely enduring harassment for an hour. He saw a large man looming over a crying petite blonde woman. "Sir," David said, stepping between them, "I need you to step out of the seat. Now." "She attacked me," Nathaniel said, keeping his hands visible. "I have it on video." "I said get up," David barked. "You are disrupting this flight and assaulting a passenger." "I did not assault her." "Sir, if you don't move to the galley right now, we will restrain you," Sarah added, though her voice wavered. She had seen the foot. She knew Courtney was trouble. But the optics of the moment were overwhelming. Nathaniel looked at Courtney. She was burying her face in a blanket, her shoulders shaking. But as he stood up to squeeze out of the pod, He caught a glimpse of her face through the fold of the fabric. She wasn't crying. She was watching him. And the corner of her mouth was twitching upward. Nathaniel felt a cold knot of rage in his stomach, but he swallowed it down. He buttoned his jacket, now stained with water and a dirty footprint, and stepped into the aisle. "I will comply," Nathaniel said stiffly. "But I want the police waiting at the gate." "Oh, don't worry," Courtney yelled from behind her blanket, her voice thick with fake mucus. "They'll be there." For the remaining 4 hours of the flight, Nathaniel was forced to sit in the jump seat in the back galley, like a misbehaving child, flanked by flight attendants who watched his every move. He wasn't allowed to use the restroom without an escort. He wasn't offered water. He sat in the humiliation, staring at the rivets on the floor, while in first class, Courtney Vance sipped champagne and told anyone who would listen how she had just survived a brutal attack. Present day. Superior Court of Los Angeles. The courtroom was cold, but Nathaniel felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. It wasn't fear, it was the suffocating weight of injustice. Mr. Sterling, Courtney's shark of a lawyer, was circling the witness stand. In the chair sat Sarah, the flight attendant from that day. She looked nervous. She was a woman who was good at pouring coffee and de-escalating drunk tourists, not dissecting split-second violent encounters under oath. Sterling adjusted his glasses, smiling warmly at her, a predator putting its prey at ease. "Ms. Jenkins," Sterling began softly, "you stated earlier that Ms. Vance was annoying. Is that correct?" "Yes," Sarah said, her voice small. "She was being loud. And she had her feet on Mr. George's seat." "Right. Rude behavior," Sterling nodded dismissively. "But being rude isn't a crime, is it? Being annoying doesn't justify physical violence, does it?" "No," Sarah said. "Now." Sterling's voice hardened slightly. "Let's talk about the moment of the altercation. You were in the galley preparing the meal service, correct?" "Yes." "So, you did not see the first movement? You didn't see who started the physical contact?" Sarah hesitated. She looked at Nathaniel, apologetic. "I heard shouting. When I turned around, I saw Mr. George holding her wrist." "Aha," Sterling said, dragging the word out. "You saw Mr. George holding her. Did you see Ms. Vance hit him?" "No, Did you see Ms. Vance scratch him?" "I saw marks on his arm later, but I didn't see her do it," Sarah admitted. So Sterling pivoted to the jury, spreading his arms wide. "The only thing our independent witness actually saw was the defendant, a man twice my client's size, gripping her wrist forcefully while she screamed for help. Is that accurate?" "Technically, yes," Sarah whispered. "Thank you. No further questions." Sarah stepped down, looking defeated. Nathaniel's lawyer, Alana, squeezed Nathaniel's arm under the table. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Sarah was just the appetizer. Sterling is about to serve the main course." "Your Honor," Sterling announced. "The plaintiff would like to introduce Exhibit B into evidence. This is video footage recorded by Ms. Brittany Coles, a passenger seated in row 4. The courtroom screens flickered to life. Nathaniel watched, his jaw tightening. He knew this video. It had been all over the internet for 3 months. It was the reason he had been placed on administrative leave at George Dynamics. It was the reason his children had been harassed at school. The video was shaky, vertical footage. It started in media res. The audio was garbled, screaming. The frame swung wildly and then focused. There was Courtney, looking small and terrified. And there was Nathaniel, his face a mask of anger, his large hand clamped around her thin wrist. "Get off me! He's hurting me!" Courtney's voice in the video was shrill and piercing. Then, the video showed Nathaniel releasing her, and Courtney collapsing back. It showed Nathaniel standing up, looking menacing due to the low angle of the camera. Then the video cut to black. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Sterling let the silence stretch. letting the image of Nathaniel, the angry black man, burn itself into the retinas of the jurors. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling said solemnly, "the camera doesn't lie. You heard the defense claim that Mr. George was the victim, that he was being bullied. But look at that screen. Who holds the power in that frame? Who is the aggressor?" He walked over to the jury box, leaning on the railing. "This video went viral for a reason, because it shows a powerful man losing his temper and physically restraining a young woman who dared to annoy him. Ms. Vance has suffered panic attacks every time she steps near an airport since that day. She has lost brand deals because, ironically, internet trolls blamed her." He shook his head in mock sadness. "We aren't just asking for compensation for the medical bills for her wrist sprain, which Dr. Aris confirmed was consistent with being grabbed. We are asking for punitive damages. We are asking you to tell Mr. George that his wealth does not give him the right to put his hands on people." Nathaniel looked at the jury. He saw it in their eyes. The shift. An older woman in the back row, who had looked sympathetic earlier, was now frowning at him, arms crossed. A young man in the front row was shaking his head. The video was powerful. It lacked context. It lacked the lead-up. It lacked the truth. But it was visceral. Alana stood up slowly. It was time for the cross-examination, but she knew she couldn't fight the video with words alone. She needed to dismantle the narrative. "Your Honor," Alana said, her voice cool and crisp like autumn air, "the defense reserves its right to cross-examine witnesses later. However, we would like to address the video evidence presented." "Is there an objection to the authenticity?" Judge Holloway asked, peering over his spectacles. "Not to the authenticity of this specific file, Your Honor," Alana said, walking to the center of the room. She didn't look at the jury. She looked directly at Courtney Vance. Courtney was dabbing her eyes again, avoiding Alana's gaze. "But," Alana continued, "Mr. Sterling is right about one thing. Cameras don't lie. But people do. And people edit." Sterling stood up. "Objection! Counsel is testifying." "Sustained," the judge said. "Ms. Hart, get to the point." "The point, Your Honor, is that the plaintiff has presented a 6-second clip of a 3-minute interaction," Alana said. "We believe this context is manipulated to obscure the truth." "Do you have evidence to the contrary?" the judge asked. Nathaniel reached into his pocket. He felt the cold metal of a USB drive he had given Alana weeks ago. But they weren't using that yet. That was the nuclear option. First, Alana had to trap Courtney in a lie under oath. "We do," Alana said. "But first, I would like to call Courtney Vance back to the stand for clarification on the video she just authenticated." Courtney stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked confident. She thought the video was her shield. She didn't realize it was about to become the rope she would hang herself with. As she walked past Nathaniel to get to the stand, she paused for a fraction of a second. "You should have settled," she mouthed, so quietly only he could hear. Nathaniel looked straight ahead. No, he thought, I shouldn't have, because money comes and goes, Courtney. But the truth? That lasts forever. Alana waited for Courtney to sit. She placed her hands on the podium and smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "Ms. Vance," Alana began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "In that video you seem very frightened." "I was terrified," Courtney said breathlessly. "And you claim Mr. George grabbed you unprovoked?" "Yes, I was just sitting there, Alana repeated. "You weren't, say, putting your foot on his face?" "No, that's disgusting. I would never do that," Courtney lied. Her voice was steady. She was a sociopath in pastel. "And you didn't strike him first?" "Never." "And you didn't destroy his personal property?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Alana nodded slowly. She looked down at her notes, then back up at Courtney. "Ms. Vance, are you aware that modern aircraft, particularly the Delta One suites, are equipped with overhead security sensors? They aren't standard cameras, but they record movement and heat signatures for safety analytics." Courtney blinked. The color drained slightly from her cheeks. I didn't know that." And Alana continued, stepping closer. Are you aware that Mr. George's phone, the one you tried to swat out of his hand, didn't stop recording when you hit him? The courtroom went dead silent. Sterling jumped up. Objection! Ambush! It was submitted into discovery this morning, Your Honor, Alana said calmly, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. It seems Mr. Sterling didn't check his email before court began. She turned to the bailiff. I would like to play Defense Exhibit A, the full video, including the audio. Nathaniel watched Courtney. The smirk was gone. Her hands were gripping the railing of the witness stand so hard her knuckles were white. The real show was about to begin. The courtroom tech, a young man with thick glasses and a bored expression, fiddled with the AV inputs. To him, this was just another Tuesday. To Nathaniel George, it was the difference between vindication and professional ruin. The silence in the room during this technical interlude was excruciating. It stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Courtney Vance sat in the witness box, her face pale, her eyes darting between her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, and the large monitor facing the jury. Sterling was standing, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his confident veneer showing hairline fractures. He hadn't seen this footage. He had built his entire case on the shaky foundation of his client's word and a selectively edited 6-second clip. Ready, Your Honor, the tech announced. Proceed. Justice Holloway commanded, leaning forward, his chin resting on his hand. The screen flickered from blue to the vertical aspect ratio of a smartphone recording. The audio kicked in first, the deep, steady drone of jet engines, overlaid by the sharp, crisp sound of Coltrane, playing from headphones that weren't fully sealed. Then, the image resolved. It was high definition. 4K. Nathaniel had the latest iPhone, and the lens caught every pore, every dust mote floating in the first-class cabin light. The perspective was from Nathaniel's chest level. It looked directly at seat 2B. There was Courtney Vance. Not the weeping victim currently sitting in the witness stand, but a woman radiating aggressive boredom. She was reclined, her phone in one hand. And there was the foot. On the massive courtroom monitor, it was undeniable. Her bare foot was not just elevated. It was propped squarely on Nathaniel's armrest, the heel digging into the leather, the toes extending over the boundary line, hovering inches from the camera lens. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. It was a visceral reaction to the violation of personal space. In the video, Nathaniel's voice was heard from behind the camera, calm, measured. I am asking you one last time. Please remove your foot from my person. On screen, Courtney rolled her eyes. She looked directly into the lens and smirked. It was a look of pure, distilled malice. Or what? You gonna cry to the stewardess? I'm comfortable. Deal with it. Then she extended her leg. The jury watched in high definition as her big toe poked the lapel of Nathaniel's suit jacket. Oops, Video Courtney whispered. I slipped. In the witness box, real Courtney closed her eyes. A single tear leaked out, but this time it wasn't performance art, it was dread. The video continued. Nathaniel's voice again. You wanted attention, you're about to get it. Then, the violence. It didn't happen the way Sterling had described. It wasn't a scuffle, it was an ambush. Courtney's face on the screen twisted into a snarl. She lunged forward. The camera shook violently as her hand struck the phone, but Nathaniel's grip held. The microphone picked up the distinct, wet thwack of her nails raking across his skin. Give me that, she screamed. The camera stabilized. It showed Nathaniel catching her wrist in mid-air as she swung for his face. It showed him holding it, not twisting it, not crushing it, just stopping the momentum. And then, the most damning moment of all. Nathaniel released her. He put his hands up. Courtney sat back in her seat. She looked at her wrist. It was fine. She looked at Nathaniel. She took a deep breath. And then, on camera, she looked at her friend across the aisle and winked. It was quick, but on the big screen, it was unmistakable. A wink. A signal. Then, she threw her head back and began to scream. "He's hurting me! Help! He's breaking my arm!" The screaming on the video filled the courtroom, shrill and fake. It was perfectly synchronized with the calm, smiling face of the woman on the screen who was checking her reflection in the window while she yelled for help. Alana Hart signaled the tech. Pause. The image froze on Courtney's face mid-scream, her eyes devoid of actual fear, looking calculated and cold. Alana turned to the jury. She didn't say a word. She let the image burn into their minds. She let them compare the screaming banshee on the screen with the fragile flower sitting in the witness box. Then she turned to Courtney. "Ms. Vance," Alana said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly low volume, "you testified 5 minutes ago that you never touched Mr. George. You testified that he attacked you unprovoked. You testified that you were terrified." Alana pointed to the frozen screen. "Is that the face of a terrified woman? Or is that the face of a woman who is acting?" Courtney gripped the railing. Her knuckles were white. He provoked me. He was filming me without my consent. That's illegal." "Actually," Alana corrected, "under Federal Aviation Administration regulations, recording in the cabin is permitted as long as it does not interfere with crew duties. But that's not the issue here. The issue is perjury." Alana walked closer to the stand. The rhythmic clacking of her heels on the wooden floor sounded like a clock counting down. "You lied to the flight attendants. You lied to the police at LAX. And today, you lied to this court. You claimed Mr. George caused you severe emotional distress and a loss of income because you were too traumatized to work." Alana walked back to her table and picked up a thick stack of papers. "Mr. Sterling mentioned you lost a brand partnership. Specifically, a lucrative contract with Revolve, the fashion retailer. He claimed you missed their winter gala in Aspen because you were, quote, bedridden with anxiety and physical pain." Alana dropped the stack of papers onto the defense table with a heavy thud. "We subpoenaed your travel records, Ms. Vance, and your social media archives." Alana looked at the judge. "Permission to introduce Defense Exhibit C." "Granted," Judge Holloway said. His voice was icy. He was looking at Courtney with a mixture of disappointment and anger. Judges hated being played. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a video from a plane. It was a series of Instagram stories. The date stamped on the top was December 16th, 2 days after the flight. 2 days after she was supposedly bedridden with PTSD and a sprained wrist. The photo showed Courtney Vance, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, holding a magnum of champagne. The location tag read, "The Little Nell, Aspen." The caption read, "Living my best life. Unbothered. #Aspen, #Revolve Winter." "Ms. Vance," Alana said, reading the caption aloud. "Unbothered. Is that a medical term for severe emotional distress?" The courtroom erupted. The gavel banged, sharp and loud, cutting through the murmurs of the gallery like a gunshot. "Order!" Justice Holloway barked. "One more outburst and I will clear this courtroom!" He turned his gaze to the witness stand. Courtney Vance looked like a trapped animal. The pastel cardigan suddenly seemed ridiculous, a costume that had failed to convince the audience. Sterling stood up, his face flushed. "Your Honor, I object. These social media posts lack context. My client puts on a brave face for her job. Influencers have to project happiness even when they are suffering." Overruled, Holloway snapped. The witness claimed she was physically unable to attend the event and lost income. The photo shows her at the event drinking alcohol with no visible brace on her alleged sprained wrist. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling." Sterling sank into his chair. He knew it was over. He was already mentally calculating how to minimize his own disbarment risk. Alana Hart wasn't done. She didn't want to just win. She wanted to ensure Nathaniel George was inoculated against any future accusations this woman might fabricate. "Ms. Vance," Alana continued, pacing slowly in front of the jury box, "let's talk about the same medical condition you cited on the plane. You told Mr. George and the flight attendant that you needed to elevate your feet due to swelling, a condition that required you to place your bare foot on a stranger's face." It flares up," Courtney stammered. Her voice had lost its shrill confidence. It was now thin and brittle. "I have circulation issues." "We have your medical records here," Alana said, waving another document. "Dr. Aris, whom you paid to diagnose your wrist, notes no history of circulatory issues. In fact, your physical for the Los Angeles Marathon, which you ran 3 weeks prior to the flight, lists you in peak physical condition." Alana stopped and leaned against the railing, looking directly at Courtney. "There is no condition, is there, Courtney?" My legs get tired," Courtney whispered. "Your legs get tired," Alana repeated flatly. "And that entitles you to assault a passenger?" "I didn't assault him. He's a big guy. I'm a small girl. How can I assault him?" Courtney yelled, tears streaming down her face again, but these were angry tears. The tears of a spoiled child being told no for the first time in her life. "Assault isn't about size, Ms. Vance. It's about intent. And it's about power." Alana turned to the jury. "You looked at Mr. George, and you saw someone you thought you could push around. You thought your tears would be worth more than his truth. You thought your father's name—" Alana paused, letting the weight of the family name hang in the air, "would protect you from consequences." "Don't bring my father into this," Courtney snapped. "Oh, we have to," Alana said softly, "because that's the final piece of the puzzle." Alana turned to the tech one last time. "Exhibit D, please." The screen shifted to an email chain. After the incident, Alana narrated, Mr. George's employer, George Dynamics, received an email. It was sent from the personal account of Robert Vance, your father. But the metadata tracks the IP address to your penthouse apartment in Santa Monica. Courtney froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The email, Alana read, demanded that Mr. George be fired immediately for endangering a VIP. It threatened to pull Vance Real Estate's shipping contracts from George Dynamics if they didn't comply, a contract worth $4 million annually. The jury looked at Nathaniel. He sat stoically, his hands clasped. He had been placed on leave because of this email. He had almost lost his company, his reputation, his livelihood. Not because of what happened on the plane, but because Courtney Vance had tried to blackmail his boss when the video didn't go viral enough to ruin him. "You didn't just want an apology," Alana said, her voice rising with righteous anger. "You tried to destroy this man's career. You impersonated your father to blackmail a logistics firm. That is corporate extortion, Ms. Vance. And that is a felony." Courtney looked at Sterling. "Do something," she hissed. Sterling looked at the table. He was done. "Ms. Vance," Alana said, closing her folder, "you kicked a man. You lied about it. You sued him for $1 million. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to starve his family by getting him fired. Do you have anything to say to Mr. George?" Courtney looked at Nathaniel. For a moment, the courtroom waited for an apology, for a shred of humanity. Courtney wiped her nose. She straightened her spine. She looked at Nathaniel with cold, dead eyes. "He shouldn't have touched my phone," she said. The gasp from the gallery was audible. "No further questions, Your Honor," Alana said, disgust dripping from her words. As Alana walked back to her seat, Nathaniel looked at her. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just nodded. The trial was effectively over. But the karma? The karma was just warming up. Justice Holloway cleared his throat. He looked at the clock. "We will take a 1-hour recess before closing arguments," the judge said. "And Ms. Vance?" Courtney looked up, startled. "Do not leave this building," the judge ordered. There are some officers from the district attorney's office who would like to speak with you regarding the evidence presented in Exhibit D. The color drained from Courtney's face completely. The civil trial was ending, but her criminal nightmare was just beginning. The recess felt like an eternity, but for Courtney Vance, it was likely the shortest hour of her life. When court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted from a civil dispute to a public execution. The gallery was packed. Word had spread. The rude plain girl wasn't just losing, she was being dismantled. Nathaniel sat quietly. He felt the weight of the last few months lifting, the sleepless nights, the awkward conversations with his board of directors, the fear that his children would see their father branded a violent man. He looked at the jury as they filed back in. They didn't look at Courtney, they looked at him, and in their eyes he saw respect. Mr. Sterling waved his closing argument. It was a surrender. He knew that anything he said now would just be fuel for the fire. He sat slumped, distancing himself physically from his client on the bench. Alana Hart did not wave hers. She stood before the jury, not as a lawyer, but as a storyteller closing the final chapter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alana began, her voice soft but carrying to the back of the room. "Entitlement is a dangerous drug. It makes you believe that your comfort matters more than someone else's dignity. It makes you believe that you can put your bare feet on a stranger's face and be the victim when they ask you to stop." She walked over to the exhibit table and picked up the USB drive. Courtney Vance didn't just have a bad day. She made a calculated choice. She chose to weaponize her tears. She chose to weaponize the legal system. She chose to try and destroy Nathaniel George, a man who has spent 20 years building a reputation of integrity simply because he had the audacity to say no to her. Alana paused, looking at each juror. "We aren't just asking you to deny her the $1.5 million she feels entitled to. We are asking you to send a message that in the real world, outside of first class and Instagram filters, actions have consequences. The truth matters, and no amount of money or family connections can protect you from it." The jury deliberated for less than 20 minutes. It was a record for the Superior Court. When the foreman, a middle-aged schoolteacher, stood up, he held the verdict sheet with a firm grip. In the matter of Vance versus George, the foreman read, "We find the defendant, Nathaniel George, not liable on all counts." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. But the foreman wasn't done. Furthermore, on the countersuit filed by Mr. George for defamation, emotional distress, and tortious interference with business contracts, we find in favor of the defendant. Courtney gasped. She had forgotten about the countersuit. She thought this was just about her not getting her money. "We award Mr. George compensatory damages in the amount of $250,000 for legal fees and lost wages," the foreman continued. "And?" The foreman paused, looking directly at Courtney. "We award punitive damages in the amount of $2.5 million. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. $2.5 million. Courtney let out a choked sound, half sob, half scream. "I don't have that kind of money. My dad cut me off." Judge Holloway banged his gavel. "Order." He looked down at Courtney. "Ms. Vance, you will remain seated. The bailiff will now escort you to the conference room where the district attorney is waiting. You are under arrest for perjury and attempted extortion." The color drained from her face until she looked like a wax figure. "Arrest? No, you can't! Daddy!" She looked around the room, but her father wasn't there. He hadn't come to a single day of the trial. Two officers stepped forward. They weren't gentle. They didn't care about her cardigan or her tears. They pulled her hands behind her back. As the cuffs clicked shut, a sound much louder and more final than the seatbelt sign on a plane, Nathaniel stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He picked up his briefcase. He walked toward the exit. As he passed Courtney, who was being read her Miranda rights, she looked at him. Her eyes were wild, pleading. "Mr. George," she stammered. "Please, I'm sorry. Tell them to stop. I'm just a girl." Nathaniel stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, one last time. "You're not a girl, Courtney," Nathaniel said, his voice deep and calm. "You're a lesson." He turned, and walked out of the courtroom doors, into the blinding Los Angeles sun. Outside, the press was waiting. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust in his face. "Mr. George! Mr. George! How does it feel?" Nathaniel stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked into the lens of the nearest camera. "It feels," Nathaniel said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through, "like I can finally stretch my legs." The fallout was swift and brutal. The video of the trial, specifically the cross-examination where Alana exposed the lie, went viral globally. It was viewed 50 million times in 48 hours. The hashtag #SitDownCourtney trended for a week. Courtney Vance didn't just lose the lawsuit, she lost everything. Revolve dropped her publicly. Her Instagram account was flooded with so much hate, she had to delete it. Her father, Robert Vance, issued a public statement distancing himself from her actions and the misuse of family resources, effectively cutting her out of the trust fund to save his own company's stock price. She was eventually sentenced to 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service for the attempted extortion. The judge ordered that her community service be served cleaning the terminals at LAX. Every day, as she pushed a mop bucket through the busy airport, wearing a neon vest that was far less fashionable than her pink tracksuit, she would see people sitting in the gate areas. Sometimes, she would see someone put their feet up on a chair, and every single time, she would flinch. As for Nathaniel George, he was reinstated as CEO of George Dynamics with a unanimous vote of confidence. He donated the entire $2.5 million settlement to a charity that helps underprivileged youth get into flight school. And every time he flies now, he still buys Seat 2A. He still drinks water. He still listens to Coltrane. But now, when the person in 2B sits down, they usually take one look at him, recognize the man who took down the plane princess, and sit very, very still. And that is exactly how he likes it. And there you have it, folks. Courtney Vance thought she was the main character, but she forgot that every villain eventually meets a hero they can't bully. She lost her money, her reputation, and her freedom, all because she couldn't keep her feet to herself. Nathaniel George taught us all a valuable lesson. Stay calm, keep your receipts, and never let anyone walk all over you. Literally. What would you have done if you were Nathaniel? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have snapped way earlier? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of supreme karma, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We post new courtroom dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.